Hello and welcome to another edition of What It Takes, where each week we try to learn what it takes to elevate our communities and improve life in our region and beyond. Today my guest is Muddiman Beebe, Executive Director of Family Promise of Greater Roanoke, an organization that serves homeless families in the region with a range of services that are both designed to prevent homelessness and to help unhoused families find forever homes. It behaves a little differently than what we might think of when we think of a homeless shelter, and I'm delighted to have Marie here to talk about the work of Family Promise. Welcome to What It Takes.
Well, thank you, Tom. It's a delight to be here.
But I always do this before we start talking about your organization. I just like to know, a little bit about a person and what led you to this kind of work. So what's your background?
My background is mostly in nonprofit. I have worked for United Way, Girl Scouts of Virginia Skyline Council, and then I also worked for numerous congregations, United Methodist churches throughout the country.
And you've been at Family Promise for a while now, right?
11, almost 12 years, yes.
And did you join it in the capacity that you are now or something else?
I started in as executive director. I was a volunteer for a long time at my local church.
And kind of what drew you to this kind of service work?
I love the model that we use where we work with families and we collaborate with congregations to use space that they have that's not currently being used during the week. So there's lots of different partners. It's a collaborative program, and it's warm, it's loving, it's hospitable.
Yeah, and that's what your clients, the people you serve, need the most in their time, I'm sure. One thing that strikes me as I did just a little research about you before this is that you all have 1,000 volunteers, and yet your staff is quite small. How do you end up with, 5 or 6 people on your staff, and that may be an overstatement, to 1,000 volunteers?
The volunteers are in local congregations. So we partner with congregations. They provide the shelter in the evening at their congregational facility. And so they provide dinner and evening hosting. They spend the night, and the staff is on call to help if there's any issues. So, a congregation may have 50 people for the week that are involved with Family Promise.
It strikes me that, when you think about the mission of a church or a synagogue or a mosque or anything else, you'd be hard-pressed to find something that aligns more closely with, the Christian principles, any religion's principles.
Correct.
I'm sure working for churches help prepare you for that. But what are some of the challenges when you're working with churches and religious organizations in doing this kind of work?
I think one of the challenges is we have to make sure that they're not proselytizing to the families. And that's very simple. We have a dear pastor at one of our local congregations who says, we love them till they ask why. And so we can, if someone feels that they want to share why they're doing this and what their faith is about, then they can do that once somebody asks them. So that's sometimes a little touchy and can be a little obstacle. The other thing is our congregations are getting older. And after COVID, so many of them have dwindled in size that's probably our biggest challenge at this point.
Right, just making sure you have the people who are able to do the things that need to be done. Because one of the things that I know that you all do is you have families, and we're going to talk about that a little bit, why that's your mission. But a family that comes to spend the night in a church means there are children, and
yes.
Those children have high energy, and you have to be. And you also probably want to give those parents who have a very stressful life, given what's going on with them, a break. So is there an ideal kind of volunteer?
A volunteer that's willing to be flexible and really just open their church home or temple home, to serving the families and accepting the families where they are rather than where they need to be. And that's the kind of volunteer that we're looking for, non-judgmental, loving, caring.
You all, this program goes out to essentially the western half of the state. So you are greater Roanoke.
Correct.
Tell me what your area of, what areas are you serving?
Mostly we serve Roanoke, Salem, Vinton, Roanoke County, Botetourt, the immediate area. We occasionally will have families that have come a little bit further out, Lynchburg, Bedford, some of those areas. They come here because there's more jobs open where they are, and there are services here that they don't have in their community. So, we hear the stories about, so-and-so has loaded a bus up and they're dropping them all off in Roanoke, and that's not really true.
I was going to ask, because that is sort of an apocryphal story. They're like,
yes.
Some communities in far southwest Virginia, their solution to homelessness is a Greyhound bus ticket.
Right.
You don't really see that, though.
Right. Not much. We will occasionally, not large buses. We might have one family or something of that nature, but it's mainly because there are no services available where they are.
Yeah. So I'm going to back up a little bit to, really what is Family Promise? What sets you apart from other organizations, and there are many fine ones that provide services to homeless people?
Okay, we work only with families with children. If there is a woman that's pregnant, we can take that family or person, but they have to have children that are school age or below with them. And it does not have to be, we do not define family. If a family identifies as a family, we take them as a family. So if they're, it's a grandmother and grandchildren and an aunt in the program, that's fine. If it's a gay or lesbian family, that's fine too. Other programs often require them to be married to stay together, and we do not have that requirement. So working only with families with children makes it different. Also, the fact that we work with congregations so much, because they stay at night in the congregation. During the day, they're in our family center where we're doing case management. So, and they change congregations every week. So on Sunday morning, they're at one congregation, and Sunday night, they're somewhere else. So a little bit of moving around.
I'm struck, and I've had some conversation with friends in the ministry about the underutilized capacity of churches, especially as in many churches the population dwindles. You have these big, beautiful buildings with commercial kitchens and, adequate facilities, often handicap accessible, all of these things that sit empty, not empty, they're used during the week, but they're not used at night.
Right.
When someone arrives, and when a family arrives, what do they need the most?
Emotional support. I have noticed, and I have no concrete evidence for this, there's no data to support me, but I've noticed that the families that come to our program usually do not have a support system that is reliable. And so that's probably the thing they need the most, is somebody that can guide them and teach them the things they need to know to be successful. Now, some of them just hit a bump in the road, and we're just there to provide that Band-Aid until they get everything together. Most of our families are unemployed when they come to us, and there's things like getting the children enrolled in programs and making sure all that happens. We try to do a very inclusive program that reaches every aspect of that family's life in order to give them a head start for when they move to permanent housing.
Give me some examples of what those wraparound services look like.
The wraparound services include things such as making sure they have mental health support if they need that. Do they need to connect with Department of Social Services so that they can get food stamps and the benefits that they need? Many times the families don't have their birth certificates for the children, the shot records, helping them get through that. We provide skill building classes in things such as nutrition, being a good tenant, exercise, smoking cessation, just about anything you can think of that could possibly be needed. We have someone that comes in and does some cooking classes with them from the extension agency. And so whatever we find, if a family has a particular need, we try to figure out how to fill it. And we don't try to do that all by ourselves. There are tons of resources throughout the community that we collaborate with to make sure we are reaching the whole person.
Yeah, imagine when somebody is referred to you or shows up on your door, they may not know what they need, right? So
Exactly.
Is there a process of just kind of figuring out, oh, you're actually in pretty good shape, let's get you to this program? How do you determine what those needs are?
It's a pretty intensive interview process that we go through once they're enrolled in our program. And it includes a little bit of everything, lots of questions, really delving into the history and what may have brought them where they are, and figuring out where they need to go. Some just come to us and they need help finding shelter or permanent housing. And if they're already employed and they're just not able to make ends meet, we can help them find that while they're in our program.
I know that you all give assistance when it comes to employment, which is obviously the key to getting out of homelessness, that you provide a lot of resources. How do you help people who maybe never were trained or had the ability to learn how to look for a job, how to present yourself in an interview? How does that work?
We have several people that provide individual training for them. We work with TAP a lot to, they have a program to help folks find jobs, do the resume, that type of thing. Our case managers, we don't expect them to know everything and be able to do everything. That's why we have a whole community. So we use that as a community approach.
Give me a sense for the scale of homelessness in our region, and especially when it relates to families, which is your area.
Tom, it has quite frankly gotten pretty bad. Just to give you an idea, in Roanoke City we do an annual count every year. We have to do it to be able to receive federal funding as a community, and it's called the Point in Time Survey. And that tells us on a given day how many people are sheltered in shelters, how many people are on the street. And I think the shocking thing has been since 2019, there's been a 153% increase in unsheltered folks, people that are living on the street in encampments, out in the woods. So that's been really shocking, and some of those are families with children. As far as, we're all seeing an increase in homelessness. The cost of housing has gone up exponentially, and wages have increased a little bit, but it does not match.
Well, and it's an availability issue too, even if
Yes.
it can be afforded on the lower end of the spectrum for a place that's safe, it's really hard to find, isn't it?
That's true. We had an elderly woman contact us. She had lived in the same place for 40 years, and her rent had gone up to the point that it was $750, and she had been able to afford that. And she got a notice from her landlord that it was going up to $1,250. And on her limited income, she didn't have that and ended up homeless. She had been housed her entire life. So the increase in housing in rent has really been an issue.
And I know that some localities have their response to homelessness in many ways, in some ways is really positive, but there's also been some sort of punitive things, right? If you're camping, there's going to be a fine. No urban camping in the city of Roanoke,
Right.
or more cracking down on encampments or informal arrangements. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you could wave a magic wand, what you catch people when they've already lost their homes or they're about to. Mm-hmm. What do you think are some things we could do to alleviate before people were to become homeless?
I think that there are several things that are available that people really should pursue. Roanoke now has a financial empowerment center that is through the city, but it's available to anybody in the area and it's free. So if somebody's trying to figure out how to manage their retirement money, they can go to the Financial Empowerment Center. But they do a great job helping with budgeting for our families, and they help people figure out how much they need to make in order to find the housing that they need. It's really great, a great program. It's new and doing well. If I could change or fix things, I love the idea of a magic wand. I've always wanted a wand. I thought it would be fun.
Don't we all?
And so I think that one of the things we can do as a community is look at what the situation is, and before jumping to a solution, make sure that that's the solution we need. I think we've had a couple of instances within the city where they've made a decision and it made a positive impact for one part of the community, but a very negative impact for the other part of the community. And if we had waited a little longer, could we have found a workable solution for all?
Right, and waiting it, I mean, we're all citizens, right? Even the people who are unhoused, with families, with addiction issues, everything else, they're all still people, right?
Yes.
We all still count.
Yes.
Let's go through just some of the specific things you do. I know one of the things that you're very keen on is prevention and diversion to avoid homelessness. How can your organization help people avoid having to use all of your services?
Right. Well, first of all, we have an aftercare program, and we'll get into that later. But families that have been through our program, if they reach out and say, I'm about to lose my housing again, I lost my job, we try to work with them to make sure to help them financially, provide some resources, send them in the right direction for other financial resources, so that they can avoid losing their home. The other thing that we can do is just, we get a lot of calls from community folks that need financial assistance for rent and utilities. And we try to work with numerous other organizations so that we're not just bombarded,
Refer them to someone who may more specifically help them.
Right, and sometimes we'll partner with someone else. We'll pay this amount if you'll pay this amount so that we can get the full amount paid. That's really what our prevention program does. There's very minimal case management with that because once you fix the problem, they can move on.
Right. The Family Center in Salem, you alluded to it. What is it? I know that several years ago when that opened, it was a big thing for your organization. What does that provide that the churches with their nighttime programs can't do?
Well, during the day, the families come to our Family Center in Salem. It is their home. We call it their home on the way home. And it's their home base because they're moving from church to church. They can keep their belongings in our basement. They each have a storage locker and shelving. There's a full kitchen so they can prepare meals during the day. We have case management there. We have toys for the kids and a playground. We have a computer lab where the adults can be working on getting jobs, finding housing, and childcare, which is another big obstacle right now.
And I know that, again, not to return to COVID too many times, but it's such a big event for our thing. How did that impact your partner churches and organizations being able to help you?
Well, COVID happened so suddenly. Within a week, we had completely pivoted our program from going to churches to we rented apartments, and we own a duplex that we were using more like transitional housing. And those folks had just moved out to their permanent home. And so we used the duplex and 2 apartments to provide shelter. And we did case management at their home, at the apartment. We'd meet outside with them so that we were socially distanced.
Everybody just had to adapt and
Yes.
survive, right?
And the churches continued to provide meals, but they didn't interact with the families at all.
I assume that transportation, both the lack of it brings people to you, but also your ability to provide it, must just be huge. And what role does transportation and the lack of a reliable vehicle play in causing someone to lose a home?
Well, if they don't have a reliable vehicle, they can't get to work. And there's where the hitch is. They need to be able to get to work. The families often do not have transportation and depend on the bus system. And the bus system does not run on Sundays, I don't believe, unless they've recently changed that. And it doesn't go to where the higher paying positions are, out in Roanoke County, out like Row Furniture, out towards Elliston, some of those places. So the higher paying jobs might be more difficult to find. Many of our families have a vehicle that is on its last leg. And so we get the call, I'm broken down, what can you do? And so we try to find folks that can help us solve their mechanical issues.
Right, and you have to have your car inspected, you have to pay for insurance. Right. Owning a car comes with its own costs, right?
Right. And when you are being faced with, should I put food on the table for the kids or have my car inspected, it's a no-brainer. You put food on the table. And so a lot of the vehicles are not well maintained, or they no longer have an inspection, they no longer have a registration. So those things are an obstacle for our families.
I can just imagine that being, something that's huge.
It is.
And students in schools, I've got a special place in my heart for schools and school administrators. How do you work with the local schools to make sure the kids are seamlessly integrated into the school population? Do they all go to, you're based in Salem, where do they go to school?
The federal law, there's a McKinney-Vento Act that requires if the student is within a reasonable distance to drive, the school is to provide transportation for the children that are homeless. Roanoke City Schools, Salem Schools, Roanoke County Schools, Botetourt, they all work with us very well with trying to provide transportation. So we can get the children in the schools that they came from rather than moving them around, providing some stability in their lives by allowing them to stay in the same school. If we have a family that comes to us during the summer or they've moved here and everything fell through and they need shelter, we will get them enrolled in Salem schools.
So as we get close to the end of the program, if someone is experiencing homelessness or knows someone or fears that they're about to become homeless, and they need your help or they need help, what's the first step?
I would recommend them call 211, the information and referral program. It's just like calling 911, but it's 211. And they have access to resources to point them in the correct direction. if they are interested in coming directly to Family Promise, they can reach out to us.
Okay, and anybody, do you have a couple requirements?
Yes, families with children, and they have to be sober while they're in our program and free from drugs and alcohol. I mean, free from a violent criminal history.
Okay, thank you so much. And if while you've been watching this conversation, you find yourself wondering how you might help, we encourage you to reach out to Family Promise at familypromiseroanoke.org. For What It Takes, I'm Tom Lambert.